Hey, welcome back everybody. I know it's been a while. Sorry about that. Busy times around here. I say that, but, well, yes, has been busy times. But just kind of got out of the habit of streaming, unfortunately, but I have been working on a lot of projects, so we should be back to business as usual now. Anyway, hey, you don't care about that. What you care about is what we're doing today, which we are doing an N64RGB installation. How do you like my gloves? I decided to try to be safe and not get lead poisoning, since I do so much work nowadays with the soldering. So, basically what we're talking about today is the N64RGB install that I've done many times before. But the main difference today, compared to what we've done before, is that I'm going to show how to do the basic N64RGBv1 install with the voltage regulator, separate voltage regulator. It came to my attention that I never did that before. In my previous video on this subject of the voltage regulator, I talked about my integrated N64RGB voltage regulator mod, this one here, which actually has the voltage regulator built in, and I explained how to install that one, but the installation process is not the same for this one compared to the original mod with the separate regulator board. And since I do get a lot of people inquiring about those boards and purchase the board from me and then ask how to install it, I wanted to have a video I could point to directly to show how to do this. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than if you were installing one of these voltage regulator boards with a Tim Worthington N64RGB mod. Mainly that just comes down to the fact that Tim Worthington's board is laid out a little bit different than Bordy's board. But the same concepts are going to apply. So just imagine that this installation is exactly the same as a Tim Worthington board with the minor with one minor change, which I'll explain when we get to it. Okay, so now that's out of the way, let's zip this N64 open. I always use the feet. If you haven't seen my other installation videos, I always use the feet as screw holders. They're like perfect for that. Keeps you from losing your screws, which is nice. All right. Let's pop this baby open. Okay, so what are we working with? Oh, it's a CPU 03. And I believe the CPU 03 does not use the MAV-NUS adapter. I think it's ADV, or AVD, NUS, one of those. Which means we don't need the MAV-NUS adapter. So we'll confirm that here in a second, but that appears to be the case. Let's see here. Ooh, I don't see my little magnetic grabber, so I'll just do this the old-fashioned way. I guess I guess tweezers are the old-fashioned way. I don't know. All right. Oh, let's see here. These two little screws need to be removed as well. Apologies about the screws. I know I normally remove the screws in advance, but this was kind of impromptu to a certain degree. I was about to do this mod, and I thought, you know, I hadn't really covered this topic very well for the standard N64RGB mod. Okay, yes, so this uses the VDC NUS, so this does not need the MAV NUS adapter. We're just going to solder directly to this chip. Now, whenever I go to install one of these boards, I pre-solder the, come on, camera, come on. Get it together. Okay, I pre-solder the ribbon cables to these boards. That way, it's just easier than trying to solder them on whenever you get to the point where you're actually mounting the board in place. So I've already soldered the ribbon cables that are cut to length. This ribbon cable for the digital portion of the mod is 16 centimeters long. That's what you want to... Whenever I sell a kit that comes with a 16 centimeter long ribbon cable that looks like this. Basically, it's just a 20 conductor ribbon cable. You just strip off the number of conductors you need for the mod that you're doing. But anyway, it's 16 centimeters long on this side, and on this side, I think it's half of that. So I guess 8 centimeters long for the analog portion of the mod. Man, my camera does not want to focus on this at all. Sorry about that. So I think that's 8 centimeters long. I usually kind of just cut these. I just kind of eyeball it whenever I'm doing it. Cut them in half. Alright, so let's look at this here and see what we've done so far. Okay, so far what I've done is I've soldered all the digital lines here, and ground, and control and reset, but I did not solder the VCC wire. See how I split the ribbon cable open and left an opening for the VCC pad? That's because we're not going to be connecting the VCC directly to the VDC NUS chip like you would if you weren't installing the power regulator mod. So because of that, the VCC pad is left free. And we're going to solder the 3.3 volt regulator wire to the VCC pad later. I'll show you that in a minute, but on the Tim Worthington mod, what you would do is you would solder everything here except for the 3v3 pad. That's what Tim labels it rather than VCC. It's just a bit of a labeling difference. But same concept. Solder everything up except for the 3v3 pad, and you'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and get to work on this one. And let's see if I can remember how to get you zoomed in, which let's see here. I think I made a mistake. A while back. There we go. Alright. Sorry about that. I forgot how I had my zoom settings configured on this camera. I changed some stuff a while back, so everything's a little bit weird for me right now. Okay, so got our VDC NUS here, and because it's the VDC NUS, I have to actually look at a pinout, which I didn't plan for. Excuse me. Let me check this here. Because I don't do very many VDC NUS installs. Most of the N64s I get are NS2 revisions or NS3 revisions, which have anything past the CPU-0 -04, I think, has the MAV and US adapter, which means that you don't need to look at a pinout when you're installing because the adapter is already set up exactly the way it needs to be. So let's see here. Aha, VDC and US. Okay. So we go one pin down, and then we... Alright, so when you're wiring this up, if you're using a ribbon cable like the kind that I supply here, on the VDC and US, you need to solder basically this first pin up here. Oh, it is pin 1. So that's a 3-volt signal there. That's the 3.3 volt rail. Then you've got D0 through 7, and then let's see here. D0 through 6. So you've got all the bits of the digital video signal, and then after that you have a ground pad, and then desync, clock, and ground again. So on Bordy's N64RGBv1 board, or at least my particular revision of it, which is what I sell, you've got D0 through 6, then you've got digital sync, then clock, then ground. So what that means is that the last 3 here, digital sync, clock, ground, you need to separate those off. So I've already got control and reset split off here, so just disregard these two. What you need to do here is split off the last 3 conductors. Yep, there goes my X-Acto knife. There we go. Alright, so what you want to do is you want to take the last 3 conductors here and basically just split them off separate from the rest, like so. That way you can spread them out and create a space so you hop over that ground pad that you don't need to hit a second time. Or you don't, there's 2 ground pads. You want to skip over the one in the middle. Why? Because that's how the mod was designed. It's made mainly for the MAV in US adapter. If it were me, which it very well could have been, given the fact that I've reworked this mod several times now, I probably would have gone through and made the MAV in US adapter have the same pinout as the VDC in US, and then made that pinout match on the board side so that you wouldn't have to do any of these kinds of shenanigans. But, you know, I kind of came into this after the fact and have just been reworking it as I go. And that, like, those fundamental pinout changes are not something that I love being responsible for. So we're going to add a little solder to the legs here to make it easier. Let's see if I can get you a little bit of light here. To make it easier to attach the wires. And then I'm going to go in. Let's see. I'm going to put a little bit of a bend to your wire and get it lined up. Get it lined up right on the pins. Then you want to go in and tack the first one down. Now I pre-tin this wire. Whenever you receive wire from me, if you're doing one of these mods sold by me, it won't be pre-tinned like this, but all you have to do is come in with a little bit of solder, strip the wire, pre-tin it, and you're good to go. Alright, so the 2 outside pads are tacked. Now we want to skip over that ground pad and go to the very end here and tack that pin, and then we'll just go ahead and solder these 3 in place. Alright, now that we're done with that, just need to come back in here and get the rest of these aligned to where we can just come in and hit each one of them, solder them in place. And this is where pre-tinning your wires and using good quality tacky flux really comes in handy, because you'll notice that we didn't even have to add any solder to these connections. Didn't even have to add solder, because the way that the wires are already tinned and the whole area is fluxed well with Amtech NC559 tacky flux, you don't even have to bring in new solder. You can just tack everything in place and you're good to go. I'm going to double check this under the microscope. Always a good idea. Give me just a second. Alright, so it looks good. There is one wire that I'm going to touch up here. Sorry if you can't see it. Try to get the microscope closer to the camera so that maybe you can see what I'm doing while I'm working on the microscope. But I am not entirely sure if that's working out the way I hoped. But other than that one, they all look pretty good. I'm touching up another one. That didn't really look bad. It was just kind of slightly out of alignment. Okay. So that's pretty much it. There you go. Everything's soldered in place. Looks good. All right, let's switch back over. Zoom out a little bit. Let's bring this over. You want to fold over the cable, and then we want to peel back these other two conductors for control and reset to get them over here to the PIF NUS. Alright, so on this old revision, the controller port 1 signal is actually on pin 16 of the PIF NUS, so that's where you're going to solder the control wire, and then the reset wire is on pin 27. So let's come in here. Let's take this wire and split it. Okay, and looking at the pinout on the board, if it will focus. So you see reset is on the right, control is on the left. So when we translate that down here to this cable, reset is on the right, control is on the left. So we're going to go ahead and solder these in place. So first of all, I'm going to add a little bit of solder to pin 27 and pin 16. There's a little bit too much solder. We're going to add a little bit of flux too, because probably should have done that from the start, but since these are only a couple of little wires that are getting soldered, I don't usually worry about the flux as much. Alright, let's go ahead and solder reset. So you're just going to get the reset wire down in there. Solder it in place like that. See if I can get you a little closer there. Alright, and then, so reset soldered in place. Now let's go for control. Alright. And if you look at that, get a couple of nice clean joints. Let's go ahead and hit that with a bit of alcohol Hit the other wire with a bit of alcohol. And I don't know where my toothbrushes are. Oh, I do. They're over at the ultrasonic cleaner. Alright, so we're just going to take a little paper towel here and dab up these areas. This stuff isn't, it's not a problem to leave it there. This Amtech flux is, it doesn't cause any problems if it's left in place. It just doesn't look as nice. Alright, if you look here, this is hard to see with the camera, but if you look here, this wire right here looks like it might be bridged over to this pin here, which is ground, and I believe this is digital sync. It is not bridged, but if you want to just be safe, you can come in here with your tweezers, and you can grab onto the conductors, heat it up a little bit, and just slide it over. See, now that completely cleared any kind of concerns about it being bridged, but and it looks a little bit nicer. Not that it really matters, because no one would ever see that and it would never be a problem, but you know, just trying to make our stuff as pretty as possible. That's really what it's all about in the retro modding community. So there you go. Alright, let me double check all these connections. And make sure nothing's loose. And we're looking good. Alright. So let's go ahead and zoom you out here. And we'll take a look at what's up next. So used to, I would put a little piece of double-sided adhesive here. I've actually kind of changed my policy on that now. I like to leave it loose. And the reason is because I don't like having to bend the tab on the back of the heatsink. Normally, on this heatsink, you would take this little tab here, this metal tab, and bend this out of the way. I don't like doing that. I like to leave it all in place. Now, this metal tab does have some clearance space where you can fit the ribbon cable underneath there, and if you put the adhesive down there, it limits the amount of clearance space that you have there. So I just leave the adhesive out. It gives you a little bit more slack on the cables as well if you need to make some adjustments. Like I said, I cut these to 16 millimeters. 16 centimeters, these cables, which is enough to get it in place properly, but having the cable a little bit loose there just gives you a little bit of slack whenever you're getting everything adjusted and put in place here. So let's go ahead and get this put back together partially. One of the things I always like to do is put the heatsink wires back in. They're not the heatsink wires, the heatsink screws, these two right here, back in place, because it'll hold the heatsink together to the main board, but it still lets you flip the rest of the main board out of the case, and you can do the work you need to do on the back side of the board. Let's see here. Where's my roll of adhesive? Where's my adhesive roll? I think it's in the other room. I'll be right back. Alright, here I am. I'm back. I've got my roll of adhesive here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut myself a little piece of adhesive. Whoops. There goes all my screws. Go ahead and cut myself a little piece of adhesive to put on the back of this mod board. I usually cut this in advance, but I didn't this time. And with the adhesive, it isolates the board from the heatsink. Now, this funny thing about this heatsink is that, I mean, obviously you need to isolate the components from the heatsink, but funny thing about it is, it's aluminum. And you might be thinking, well, aluminum, that's really conductive stuff. And it is electrically conductive. But the thing about aluminum is that it also has an extremely hard oxide layer on the outside of it. And that oxide layer makes it to where that even though aluminum itself is really conductive, the actual surface of the aluminum has the oxide layer on it that is non-conductive, which means that if you probe this aluminum heatsink with a multimeter, you won't get any kind of short. There's no connection between one end of the heatsink to another, and that's just because there's so much resistance in the outer layer of aluminum oxide that you have to actually scratch the surface of the heatsink with your multimeter leads to even get it to show a connection. So while aluminum is really conductive, the oxide layer on the outside of aluminum is not conductive. So obviously you do need to isolate the backside of the board, and that's what the adhesive does. But it's not like if a component touches the backside of the heatsink, it's going to immediately short the whole thing out. It's just not really a concern, a huge concern. That's why I only use just a single layer of adhesive. I'm not loading it up with electrical tape or anything like that, and there's really no need to. Alright, so for this breakout board, the AV breakout board, simply just throw some solder on there. Get each one of those connections good. Alright, so the RGB portion of this mod is done. Now the last thing is going to be adding the voltage regulator. So here's where the voltage regulator goes. This is the backside of the power switch for the N64. So the voltage regulator goes right here on the back of the power switch. And all you have to do is add solder to this point right here. Alright. Try to zoom you in a little bit. So you're adding solder to this point here, and then this via here, this via here, and then you're going to solder your wire to this pad labeled 3.3V, 3.3 volts. So for the power wire, you want to use something decent thickness of wire. Let's see here. I think I have some. This is 28 gauge wire, which is what I use for power currently. I like it a lot, 28 gauge. Let's see, where's my... Oh, there we go. So 28 gauge wire is pretty good for power. It's enough, it's thick enough that, you know, it's not an issue to provide the power to the board. So you're going to strip it back. You can use larger wire as well. You could go to like the 26 or 24 gauge wire, and you'd be fine. You don't want to go too much bigger than that because then it just becomes hard to manage the wire. But I like this 28 gauge wire. It's pretty good. I've used 24 gauge and 26 gauge in the past. This is what I got a big spool of right now, so this is what I'm using. Alright, so you just pre-tin the wire, which I just did. And then you're just gonna solder that wire onto this 3.3 volt pad. And then you just bring that wire up over to the AV, to the kind of like where the AV output is, and just fold it over. And when you put the metal backing back on, what you want to make sure of is that this little tab here does not pinch the wire. And you also want to make sure that the wire passes cleanly through that opening right there. If you do that, you won't have any issues. Alright, so now that that's in place, we're going to bring this wire over. And I like to try to make it look nice. I like to bring it around with the AV ribbon cable. And so the VCC pad is right here. At this point, it's kind of tough to get to. So what I like to do is I like to actually solder. Let's see if I can zoom in a little closer. I like to actually solder this wire to the back side of this ferrite bead right here. This is a big pad, and it's directly connected to the VCC pad. I mean, it's the same exact electrical point in the circuit. So you solder it to the back side of this L1 slash ferrite bead pad. And so we're just gonna cut that. Strip that wire. Tin the wire. And I'm going to trim that wire down just a smidge. It's a little bit longer than I want it to be. Alright. So that looks good. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to bring this wire over here. And we're just going to solder it to that L1 pad. Ferrite bead. FB1, L1. That's how it's labeled on this board. So let's just come in here. Come in here. We'll add some solder to that. I'm not super thrilled with that connection. Add a little solder to that pad so it has more to flow into. Okay. That's a good solid connection. And then we'll just bring that wire back and get all of this organized nice and neat. Make sure that that wire is still passing through those areas that we want it to. So, got the wire here, bring it over, tuck it in back behind with the AV ribbon cable wire. Okay, and that's pretty much done. So let's go ahead and pop it back into at least the bottom portion of the shell. And I'll go ahead and pop the couple screws in just to hold it all together while we do our test. All right. Come on, power adapter. Come on. Power, EverDrive. SCART cable. Controller. Alright, game capture. Let's fire it up. Okay, let's boot Super Mario 64 because that's my favorite for testing. I like it. Pretty good for testing. Get a lot of colors, you know. It's nice. Alright, so you got, as you can see, there's Mario. Mario's there. And yank on his face a little bit. Let's go ahead and just load a save. And let's check our IGR functions. So we're gonna turn de-blur off and on. So you see it's getting blurry. Now it's sharp again. Blurry, sharp. Let's go ahead and try 15-bit color. Yeah, you can see kind of the splotchiness in the blue there. That's 15-bit color. I don't know why you'd need it, but it's a feature of the RGB board. And then let's do a reset. Okay. Well, there you go. All features working. So that's what you want to see there. One more test I like to do is I always like to do Star Wars Rogue Squadron, because Star Wars Rogue Squadron has the title picture. It's a full color, you know, a really nice full color picture with a lot of color depth. So if you're missing a bit of, like if you're missing one of the bits in the DAC section of this mod due to a wiring error or something, you can tell that you're missing color because it's a full color image that you're looking at. So let's go ahead and look at the title screen. And as you can see, that image looks perfect. If you were missing a bit in the color depth of the digital signal, you would see like splotchy areas where the color transitions are not smooth because you're missing some of that color detail. So this is a really good game to test for that sort of thing, just because this title menu is so it's so nice looking. So anyway, that's really it. So we've covered today how to install the N64RGBv1. We've covered how to use the 3.3 volt regulator in an install where the 3.3 volt regulator is not integrated directly into the RGB mod. And hopefully you understand how that works for the Tim Worthington mod as well. Now, my understanding is that the newest revision of the Tim Worthington mod maybe doesn't need the 3.3 volt regulator anymore, because he's changed something on the board, but I've not seen that completely confirmed. I think it's kind of a mixed. I'm getting mixed signals on some of that, so I'm not sure if that's completely eliminated the need for the 3.3 volt regulator or if it's still useful on the new mod. But regardless, I'll keep offering it for people who have old installs of Tim Worthington's board who want to update it, or people who still do boardies installs besides me. Going forward, I think I have 3 more of the N64. No, I have 2. Okay. Yeah, I have 2 more of the N64RGBv1 boards that don't have the integrated 3.3 volt regulator. Once those are gone... No, I have 3. 3 more. So once those are gone, I won't be doing them anymore. I'll only be selling the ones that I designed with the integrated 3.3 volt regulator. So for my boards that you buy from me, after these are gone, you won't have to do this anymore. But you would still need it for an older board or a Tim Worthington board, assuming that it still needs it. So I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about today. I'm definitely going to be doing more streaming again. I'm going to get into a better streaming schedule again, because I've got a lot of projects I want to show and talk about. But it's just been lately, it's just been very hard to find time to get everything set up and do what I need to do. But we're going to go through a bunch more projects probably later in the week, and I'm really excited about it. Got a lot of arcade related stuff going on right now, as well as a few cartridge mod related things. We got you covered. We got you covered with mods. So we'll see you hopefully very soon. Catch you later.